Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Thank you very much for coming. Anyone who has been at Hay on Wye over the last 10 years will know that this is about as close and as good as it gets for me. You can fool the Grand Committee, you can bid for sainthood, but you fuck with a hitch at your peril. Please welcome Christopher Hitchens.
So it's a fairly slow day at the shrink, and this guy comes in, hasn't made an appointment, he's shown in, and he just stands there in front of the shrink's desk going, panting like that. And the shrink says, can I help you? Choosing his words with care. The guy just stands there going, like that, panting. The shrink thinks, give it time. Asks again if he can be of assistance. And shaking and panting. They do it a few more times, and finally the guy says, I'm just a dog, that's all I am. Nothing but a dog is all. And the shrink says, well, you want to get on the couch? The guy says, I'm not allowed on the fucking couch. Oh, you like that? Okay, well, I just want to see how easily pleased you were. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for coming to my more downsized cabaret and team venue. I had been hoping to pull the Van Morrison crowd, but this is probably more choosy. Peter may have told you that what I really live for now is stand-up and also karaoke. We don't have a karaoke machine here, you'll be sorry to find out. I did karaoke in North Korea. There's only one club in North Korea. It's only just opened, and I was one of the opening headliners at Pyongyang Karaoke Club. A stone-faced, Aztec-faced audience of paid members of the Korean Workers' Party. So I'm not shy in front of this audience at all. You can't bomb like you can bomb in Pyongyang. And I gave them Proud Mary, and girls just want to have fun. I don't want you to think I can't sing without a karaoke machine. I can left a good job in the city, working for the man every night and day. But it would be better with music, I know. And the theme of this evening is somewhat melancholy. I can sing an old dirge from Dublin which goes, you may know it, it was early last September, as near as I remember. I was walking down the street in drunken pride, when I fell into the gutter, thinking thoughts I dared not utter. And a pig came up and lay down by me side. As I lay there in that gutter, thinking thoughts I dared not utter, a fair young maid came by, and she did say, you can tell a man who boozes by the company he chooses. And at that the pig got up and walked away. And the pig got up and slowly walked away. Now, that was the karaoke bit. But the stand-up story is, in a way, sadder still. I was a finalist in the Washington Celebrity Comedy Improv a couple of years ago, and I was beaten, and I would say beaten badly and unfairly, by Senator Joseph Lieberman, then later to become one of the most disastrous vice presidential candidates in American history. And he openly cheated. He used cue cards prepared for him by his staff. And the fix was in from the start, because they were hoping, obviously, for someone famous to win so they get publicity for their ghastly charity that we were doing it for. But I realized, though, that even with cue cards, and even though he looks like a leprechaun, Senator Lieberman could have in him the makings of what we call in the United States a Catskill comedian. Perhaps some of you know what I mean, the Catskills. old Jewish retirement homes where ham comics, I suppose they don't call themselves ham comics, go and do their stuff. If you've seen Dirty Dancing, you know the sort of scene. The guy comes on, he says, so I finally found a girl who's just like my mother. Looks like her, sounds like her, acts like her, even dresses like her. So I take her home. My father doesn't like her. That's Catskill comedy. You can do it in your sleep. I personally am of the opinion that a joke is not a joke unless it is very piercingly at somebody's expense. The uses of humiliation should not be neglected. Taste is not really a consideration. There's a guy on the Los Angeles freeway trying to get home. He's stuck in the most appalling traffic on the freeway. But he has a car phone. Dials his number while still driving. Ring, ring. Phone answers. Sí. He says, Teresa. It's the Spanish maid. Sí, señor. Can you get my wife on the line? Quick. I'm in a hurry. Sí, señor. Trots away. Comes back. Wife in bedroom, señor. So, well, get her out of there. I need her in a hurry. She comes back after a bit more trotting in and out. Says, wife in bedroom with other hombre, señor. Says, what? Where are you? You in the den? See? Okay, you by my desk? See? Pull open the left-hand drawer. Is there a gun in there? See, señor. Okay. Do this. Take the gun, go upstairs, shoot her, shoot him, get on the bedroom extension. Long wait. Finally, he's still fighting the most appalling traffic and trying to hold the phone. Long wait. She comes on the line. The extension's picked up. Teresa. Sí, señor. Have you done it? Sí. Are they both dead? Sí, señor. Headshots. Sí. Okay. Now I want you open the window and throw them both out into the swimming pool. No swimming pool here, señor. Is this 2135? It's got to be at somebody's expense. I'm just giving you my sort of ABC of how to do this kind of thing if you were ever stuck for a routine. The doctor calls the guy at work. This has never happened before. And says, can you come and see me on the way home? It's really important. Can you stop by? And the guy says, yeah, why is it? I cannot tell you on the telephone. So the guy stops by his doctor's office on the way back home, and the doctor says, look, I don't know how to tell you this, and it should never have happened at my office. Okay, sit down. It's about your wife, it's not you, don't worry. Rather callously, I think. The man by now is slightly on the edge of his chair and says, well, it's the tests. She was by recently, we took some tests, we sent the samples off, and this really shouldn't, he goes on about it. Shouldn't happen at my office, can't happen. But the samples got mixed up and they've come back and it's terrible. I mean, we don't know which one is the right one. But I can narrow it down for you. The guy says, well, so what is the bottom line here? The doctor says, well, she's either got AIDS or she's got Alzheimer's. I don't know which it is. And the guy says, do you have any suggestions, doctor? And the doctor says, yeah, I do actually have a suggestion. That's why I wanted you to come by on your way home. When you get home, suggest a drive to the old girl. If she says yes, get her in the car, drive as far out of the city as you can, and then park the car, and then suggest a stroll, like in the old days, and walk her as far as you can away from that car. And when you've got her as far as you can away from it, run and jump back in the car and speed away and leave her there. And if she finds her own way home, never fuck her again. I told you, taste is not a factor. You have to keep, it has to be at somebody's expense. But if now, suppose you're doing a nicer audience than apparently you are, a sort of more tender, you can always try a little recitation. People don't teach poetry anymore, you notice this? No one's taught to memorize anything. If you can recite even a little, you can impress people, you can stir them, you can move them. Do you know the story, it's an Aesop story of the fox and the raven? The raven has the cheese and the fox wants it. How does the fox get the raven to give up the cheese? You know the Aesop story. Well, the fox flatters the raven, and this isn't a joke. Flatters the raven into thinking that it could sing, that it's a great singer, and it opens its beak and the cheese falls to the fox. It's an old Aesop story. Done into a beautiful piece of doggerel by an unknown American poet. I wish I knew who this was. It appears in the very few anthologies that I have as written by Anonymous. It's called The Sycophantic Fox and the Gullible Raven. And it goes like this. A raven sat upon a tree, and not a word he spoke, for his beak contained a piece of brie, or maybe it was Roquefort. We'll make it any kind you please. At all events, it was a cheese. Beneath the tree's umbrageous limb, a hungry fox sat, smiling. He saw the raven watching him and spoke in tones beguiling. J'admire, quoth he, ton beau plumage. The which was simply persiflage. Two things there are, no doubt you know, to which a fox is used. A rooster that is bound to crow, a crow that's bound to roost. And whichsoever he espies, he tells the most unblushing lies. Sweet fowl, he said, I hear you're more than merely natty. Indeed, I hear you sing to beat the band and Adelina Patti. Pray render with your golden tongue a bit from Götterdämmerung. This subtle speech was aimed to please the bird, and it succeeded. He thought no crow in all the trees could sing as well as he did. In flattery, completely doused, he gave the jewel song from Faust. But gravitation's law, of course, as Isaac Newton showed it, exerted on the cheese its force, and elsewhere soon bestowed it. In fact, there is no need to tell what happened when to earth it fell. I blush to add that when the bird took in the situation, he uttered one emphatic word, unfit for publication. The fox was greatly startled, but he merely sighed and answered, tut. The moral is, a fox is bound to be a shameless sinner. And also, when the cheese comes round, you know it's after dinner. But what is only known to few, the fox is after dinner too. Now, you can charm, as I say, a less or more civilized audience than yourself with stuff like that. But what they want, they like a bit of poetry and a bit of ballading. What they want is filth, you'll find. And here I think that the limerick form is probably the handiest. It's the most easy and pungent delivery system for the smut that your customers really want. And there's a story within a story about the usefulness of a limerick and also how it can go wrong. Remember, I'm telling you, this is boot camp for a stand-up. There's a boring guy who knows he's boring, and it's come round to his turn to give the toast at the annual dinner of his ghastly professional association, whatever it is. And he knows how to say a few remarks and to thank last year's retiring chairman and all this kind of thing. He feels he needs a bit of zip and brio and espiglerie, as Bertie Wooster used to call it. So he stops in his club on the way, and he says to a friend, a rather gamey friend at the bar, you wouldn't have such a thing as a kind of joke about your person, would you, that I could use to amuse the customers? And the guy said, well, I've got a reasonably filthy limerick for you. Quite easy to remember. The guy says, all right, I'll buy it. And the guy says, okay, it goes like this. There was a young fellow named Skinner who took a young girl out to dinner. Dinner went fine. By 9:30, it was Inner, not Skinner, the dinner. They repeated it, got it more or less by heart, thought it was the kind of thing that would please his clientele, and was muttering it to himself all through the dinner, knowing it was his turn soon, wondering if he'd got it right. It came his turn to speak, said, heard rather a good joke on the way here, picked it up at the club, as a matter of fact. Conscious of a slight unease, he said, there was a young fellow named Tupper, rallying, who took a young girl out to supper. He's got it, he's back on form. He said the supper went fine, and by 9:30, he was upper, not Tupper, some other fucking fellow called Skinner. This is where you can make your bloomer, ladies and gentlemen. There are various forms of obscenity that the limerick can take. The best ones, I think, are episcopal or liturgical, as in a vice both obscene and unsavory holds the Bishop of Barking in slavery. With lascivious howls, he deflowers young owls that he lures to an underground aviary. Or there was a young lady of Kew who remarked, as the curate withdrew, "The vicar is quicker and slicker and thicker and longer and stronger than you." There are less hardcore ones, like the Lady of Chichester, whose tits made the saints in their niches stir. One morning at matins, her breast in white satins made the Bishop of Chichester's breeches stir. And then there's the more raw stuff, like the Bishop of Central Japan used to roger himself with a fan. And when taxed with these acts, he replied, "It contracts and expands so much more than a man." Or the Anglican Dean of Hong Kong. The Anglican Dean of Hong Kong had a thing that was 9 inches long, and he thought that the waiters were admiring his gaiters when he went to the loo. He was wrong. That, I'm glad you noticed, that's by W.H. Auden, who did a wonderful, of whom there exists a marvelous collection of unpublished, mainly gay, filth. And then there's clean ones. When Gauguin was visiting Fiji, he observed things are different here, e.g. While Tahitian skin calls for tan spread on thin, you can splosh it on here with a squeegee. That's clean, I think you'll agree. A young engine driver called Hunt was given an engine to shunt, saw a runaway truck, by yelling out, "Duck," saved the life of the fellow in front. That's clean too. As opposed to, say, I was told by an oil man who'd known her of a girl from Red Gulch, Arizona, the inside of whose twat was so scorchingly hot that it lit his Corona. That's a dirty one. The great genius of this genre, now that Kingsley Amis and Philip Larkin have passed on and no longer exchange them and refine and polish and lovingly make them fouler and nastier and meaner, is Robert Conquest, who has, I have the honour to say I'm his friend. He keeps the limerick form well burnished and can do it in any number of ways, as dirty as you like, as clean as you like, or as literary as you like. And I thought I'd share with you, those of you who know As You Like It, will remember the 7 Ages of Man speech and the evolutions that the man performs, from being a baby, mewling and puking in his mother's arms, to the lover sighing like furnace, to the soldier seeking the bubble's reputation even in the cannon's mouth. You know it, right? It's quite a long and intricate speech. It can be done in limerick form like this, the 7 Ages. First you have puking and mewling, then very pissed off with your schooling, then fucks, and then fights, and then judging chaps' rights, then sitting in slippers, then drooling. That was a moment's work for Conquest. But I thought I wanted to end on a more elevated note, because I think in the spirit of give and take that is Hay, in the democratic atmosphere, I want to be at your mercy. I want to be anybody's. I want to be yours very soon. But I want to end on a suitably melancholy note and say, you can ask me anything you like. Anything you want at all. And I promise that my answer will be completely truthful. It's a dare. But the elevated Shakespearean note on which I wish to end was this. is with my favourite sonnet, and I'll tell you why it's favourite in a second. You may know the one I mean. It's when in disgrace with fortune in men's eyes, I all alone beweep my outcast state, and trouble deaf heaven with my bootless cries, and look upon myself, and curse my fate, wishing me like to one more rich in hope, featured like him with friends possessed, desiring this man's art and that man's scope, with what I most enjoy contented least. When in this state, myself almost despising, haply I think on thee, and then my soul, like lark at break of day arising, quits sullen earth and sings at heaven's gate for thy sweet love remembered. Such wealth brings that then I scorn to change my state with kings. And I like this sonnet above rubies, not because of the wonderful play on state and king and the political and social subtext, as we've learned to call it, but because of the earlier bit. Marvellous though that subtext is, the earlier, where he's saying, desiring this man's art and that man's scope, wishing me like to one more rich in hope, featured like him with friends possessed. What do we learn from this? There was some guy who Shakespeare envied. He thought, I wish I had this man's talent. I wish I was as good as him. I wish I was as smart. I wish I had his wit. I wish I had his gift. I can't rest until I know who that guy was. I want very, very, very badly to know. Until I know, I can know no rest. Which is why, filthy and disgusting though it is, my stand-up routine will always have this dying fall. And so does the karaoke, as you will one day find out. So I'm at your mercy now, ladies and gentlemen. It was very nice of you to come. You can ask me anything you want. I'm anybody's, I'm yours. Thank you. Maybe I shouldn't point in case you think I've filled the place with a claque of sycophantic, toadying friends who will ask me soft questions. Ma'am. Can you give it some Wellington boot? Bring it up a bit. Can't hear a blind word you're saying. She's shy. Yes. Well done. Very gallant.
I've just been in your other performance tonight, which I actually took very seriously because for the first time... because for the first time in a long time I heard somebody from the left exposing something practical and useful. And then I see you here in another role playing the clown. So exactly where do you stand?
The reason I like P.G. Wodehouse and Oscar Wilde is because they teach you to take frivolous things seriously. And serious things frivolously. I'm sorry, you were waiting for the other shoe to drop. It's all a complete farce, you understand. We're born into a losing struggle. I've been into this minutely. I've investigated the road up ahead. No one comes out of this a winner. In the meantime, I think one must show some contempt and some defiance. And the best means of doing that I know are irony and obscenity. Which is why it was a mistake for that guy to ask me about those slut Dixie chicks and persecution. And the hideous Holocaust to which they've been subjected. Don't try me too high is all I'm saying. I may look friendly and meek and so on, but I can have a mean streak a mile wide. Should I point? You go.
Hold it.
I can't see. If you think I can
I've got
see
the mic.
you. If you think I can see you, you're making a huge mistake. I can't see a thing.
Apart from the Dixie Chicks...
Oh, there you are.
Apart from the Dixie Chicks remark, what's the most offensive thing that anyone could say to an audience at the Hay Festival sponsored by The Guardian?
That ketchup in school lunches is a vegetable, I think. It is, too, a vegetable. And since it's The Guardian, if you're rich, it's your own fault. I think that would be. I'm going to let you decide, ma'am, actually. Give it to people you can reach. I really can't see a thing. With or without the shades. Hi, Angel. Yes, you can. By all means, you can. By all means, you can. You may, I mean to say.
Hello.
Hello yourself.
It's all absurd. But you're an admirer of Woodhouse, but Woodhouse is quite literary. Is there any other absurdities you get off on, like Stephen, Leacock, Edward, Lear, Lewis, Carroll? Is there absurdity there that you find useful as well?
If you challenged me to do Jabberwocky, I could do it. Do you want me to do it? But I don't like the Reverend Dodgson otherwise, and I think Edward Lear is a complete and utter pain in the ass, and has ruined the limerick form for all time by neglecting the beauty of its punchline. You want Jabberwocky? You are easily pleased. Oh fuck. 'Twas brillig and the slithy toves to gyre and gimble in the wabe, all mimsy with borogoves and the mome raths outgrabe. Some people really get off on this. Let me see. Beware the Jabberwock, my son. The jaws that bite, the teeth that catch. Beware the Jub bird, and shun the frumious bandersnatch. He took his vorpal sword in hand. Long time the manxome foe he sought. Then rested he by a something fucking yum-yum tree. And stood a while in thought, and as in uffish thought he stood, the Jabberwock with eyes aflame came whiffling through the tulgey wood and burbled as it came. 1, 2, 1, 2, and through, the vorpal blade went snicker-snack. He left it dead, and with its head, he went galumphing back. And hast thou slain the Jabberwock? Come to my arms, my beamish boy. O frabjous day, Kalukale, he chortled in his joy. 'Twas brillig and the slithy toves did gyre and gimble in the wabe, all mimsy were the borogoves and the mome raths outgrabe. Easily pleased. The Reverend, I'm more interested in the pederastic side of the Reverend Dodgson, to be absolutely honest with you. What you want is to run into a filthy schoolgirl with a dire shortage of pocket money. And that's what he thought Victorian values were. Woodhouse, and have I ever shared with you my feeling that there's a secret code that links Woodhouse to Wilde? No one's ever heard me do this before? Good, I thought that's what I was afraid of. How many is that? Do the others want to hear it? Okay, they'll know. What's the first line of The Importance of Being Earnest? It was the very first line. They don't remember. You see what you fucking waste your time with some of these paying customers. You do your best, you give it everything, and they don't remember. The first line, look at the stage directions of The Importance of Being Earnest. It says the curtain rises on, it actually says Half Moon Street, an apartment in Half Moon Street. So you know you're in a bachelor flat. You would know anyway you're in a bachelor flat in Mayfair or Piccadilly with a frivolous young man. That's clear from the curtain up, and it's in the stage directions. A butler is laying out the tea things. And in the next room, you can't see him, but somebody, or her, you don't know who it is, but someone's playing the piano in a rather banal way. This goes on for a bit, and then the music stops. And into the room walks Algernon Moncrief, who with a start, realizes the butler's been there all along, didn't know he was there, and says, this is the first line, did you hear what I was playing, Lane? And Lane says, I didn't think it polite to listen, sir. I think it's a very promising start myself. And then what happens next? Well, what happens next is one of the most terrifying aunts in English fiction sweeps in. Lady Bracknell, Aunt Augusta, and tyrannizes the whole place. And then what happens? Two silly girls come in and another silly boy. And there's a huge argument about who's going to marry who, who's going to get permission from what relative, can they afford it, sundered hearts, an intricate but pointless mystery. Then they move to the country where it's ridiculous rural deans and mad governesses, and then at the end all hearts and flowers and all sundered hearts reunited. That is the map. The importance of being earnest in 3 acts is the map of the entire social and moral and romantic universe of P.G. Wodehouse. I submit. Butler, ridiculous young man, absurd aunt. I mean, actually, I said Aunt Augusta was terrifying. Graham Greene's Travels with My Aunt, by the way, you notice, is Aunt Augusta. That's Lady Bracknell. Not as terrifying as Bertie's Aunt Agatha, it has to be said. The one who kills rats with her teeth and eats broken bottles at the light of the moon. Aunt calling to aunt like mastodons bellowing across a primeval swamp. But pretty terrifying. And so here's an interesting thing. You can trace, people have traced, buffs have traced, references, very learned ones by Wodehouse, who'd read almost everything, to almost 100 authors. Not all of them English. He was very widely read in general. And so he spent years of his life, decades of his life, in the comic and light opera theatre. There's not one reference in anything he ever writes, whether it's a letter, a play, a novel, a short story, to Oscar Wilde. It's not possible he didn't know who Oscar Wilde was, but he never mentions him. I rest my case. You see, you have to take frivolous things seriously.
I'd like to say that you are the highlight of Hay for me every year, and I think your mind is absolutely incredible, and you're a joy to listen to. But I would like to. But I would like to know.
No, you can't buy me a drink. There are 2 of you. That's off.
I would like to know if there's anything about which you don't have an opinion, and also, if you can't answer that question, what is your favourite P.G. Wodehouse line?
Probably the best. I'll get to this. I'll save up your first question for a bit. The best, probably, is when Bertie can tell that Jeeves is in a bad mood, doesn't know why. And he said, I wouldn't exactly say he was disgruntled, but he wasn't exactly gruntled either. I think that packs quite a lot into a short line. The imperishable scene, though, the summa, I think, of Wodehouse's work is in The Code of the Worcesters. The great confrontation with Sir Roderick Spode, the fascist leader, and Shrink, a megalomaniac who Jeeves tells Bertie has set up a movement for the takeover of Britain for a law and order party. It was written in 1936. And Jeeves says, and it's a Roderick's party and movement, sir, is called the Black Shorts. And Bertie says, that's fine, Jeeves, I think I understand all that, but by the way, when you said black shorts, you meant shirts, didn't you? I regret to say, sir, no. By the time Sir Roderick formed his movement, the supply of shirts had been exhausted, and his followers paraded black shorts. And Bertie says, what do you mean they go around in footer bags, do they? And Jeeves said, I'm sorry to inform you, sir, that this is the case. And Bertie says, how perfectly foul. The confrontation between him and Sir Roderick Spode is, I think, you can't do it in a line, but everyone should read that. That's the best. Yeah, there are a lot of things I know nothing about, and you can tell what they are because I don't refer to them. So I'm not going to be caught out like that.
I'd like to ask you to comment upon 2 possibly provocative statements. The first is, do you agree that the visceral anti-Americanism of the British left comes from their hatred of success? And the second, now that she's dead and about to become a saint, would you care to crack a joke about Mother Teresa?
I'll do this in reverse too, if I may, because I can't wait. I was asked by His Holiness the Pope, I was asked by the Vatican, I am not making this up, I was asked to testify against her in the sainthood hearings. And I said, yes, I got a letter from the Vatican, I said, I'm coming, I'm going to be in Rome for as long as you like, and I'll stay for as long as it takes. And I was pretty sure Vanity Fair would spring for this. And they said, there were two disappointments. One, they said, no, we'll have a special hearing for you at the Archdiocese at Catholic University in Washington, D.C., which I can see from my windows. So it was a taxi ride to go and meet this Monsignor and this hedge priest and this deacon. And the second disappointment was to discover, I didn't know this before, the office of Devil's Advocate. Everyone knows about the Devil's Advocate, right? Advocatus Diaboli, even non-Catholics know about it. The present Pope has scrapped it. There is no longer a dialectical hearing on sainthood. You don't get a prosecuting counsel appointed by the Inferno, by Lucifer. So instead it's more like a seminar on somebody's ghastly thesis, where people compare it. So, I don't know if this is a joke or not, but it's my observation that I became the first person in the history of the Roman Catholic Church to represent the devil pro bono and for free. I did it for nothing, and I told them why the old bitch shouldn't be canonized, and the other rule they've waived is this. There are two other rules they've waived. You're not supposed to start a sainthood hearing for 7 years after the death, so that popular and local superstition don't get command of the process. And you're supposed to have 2 miracles. And they opened the hearings after 3 years, so popular local superstition was still strong, and they found a miracle, which you will if you're looking for one. And it was some poor girl in Bengal who'd had a pain in her tummy, which turned out to be a tumor, and had prayed to Mother Teresa for intercession, and the tumor had gone away. And I would submit this to you objectively, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, fellow brothers and sisters in Christ. If that doesn't prove it, I don't know what does. But the family of the woman and her physicians later testified, after it had been announced and certified as a miracle, that they knew why it had been cured, and they had the operation and the medical records to prove it. So they're going to have to find another miracle now, but they will. I predict that they will. Anyway, it was a pleasure to be of the devil's party, as Blake said of Milton. Though what Blake said of Milton was he was of the devil's party without knowing it. I was of the devil's party voluntarily. The anti-Americanism of the British left, you really want your laughs, don't you? You insist on a feast of reason and a flow of soul, a gag fest. Yeah, there's something pretty lugubrious about the British left, sure. There is. It's because they know they couldn't make it in America, I think. The sad sacks, jealous, and some of them increasingly, I think, anti-cosmopolitan, anti-internationalist, provincial, dull, localized, resentful, status quo, boring.
On the subject of the American dream, have you ever been offered an endorsement deal by Rothmans or Johnny Walker? And if offered, would you take it?
Man goes into a bar and says, okay, I'll have a large glass of James Walker, please. The barman says, you mean Johnny Walker? He says, no, not when you know him the way I do. Well, I've trailed my coat. I mean, I've done my best, but no. Something about me apparently doesn't lead to sponsorship, but I've promised to keep on trying. I mean to do my bit for it.
Christopher, today I'm way back here. I heard the story secondhand that you had actually met Margaret Thatcher and that it was a very sexual experience. Do you remember that?
There are only two terms in the language that now give me an automatic erection. Which is still the polite word for it, isn't it? One of them is preemptive. That seems to work practically every time. Preventive used to work, but doesn't now. It takes preemptive to get the real sort of twanging hard on like that. And the other is, oddly enough, and I promised I'd give you the truth, the word baroness. I went to a party. This must have been in the very late 70s. She was only then the leader, newly elected leader of the Conservative Party. And I went to a ghastly party in the Rosebery room of the House of Lords for a terrible book by Lord Butler, formerly Rab Butler, on the history of the Conservative Party. It looked like a fantastically unpromising evening that I had to cover for the then New Statesman. Now I speak of the New Statesman, sadly, as an interred thing of the past. They're still publishing, I think, trading falsely under the same name. And in this magazine, I had written a few weeks before at the Tory Party conference that I thought that the power she had over the men in the Tory leadership was a sexual power. That she had an absolute radiance to her, that she knew exactly how many beans made five, and she'd sized up all of these men completely and bent them to her will. How right can you be, by the way? What happened to Francis Pym? Where is Willie Whitelaw now? Jim Pryor? You wouldn't give ninepence for the whole batch. She devoured them all. She was a gorgon. And now, my opinion, which may be immodest, is this. If in the late 1970s you're the newly elected leader of the Tory party, and the columnist for the main socialist opposition weekly says that you're full of sex, it's possible you'll notice it, or that someone will call it to your attention. At any rate, when we met and were introduced to this party, she seemed to know me. It's one of those things, it's so hard to define. Think of the moment on the tram in Dr. Zhivago, where just as they brush, there's the crackle. I can still feel it. It's not that I felt it then. And we got into an argument about what was then Rhodesia and is now Zimbabwe. And she took what I thought was a reactionary position on it, and I told her that I'd run into some Tories in my recent trip to Rhodesia who disagreed with her, and she disagreed with me on a point of fact and wouldn't let go. I was right. On the point of fact, I was correct. I insist on this. But she was so stubborn, she wouldn't give way. So finally I thought, okay, give the lady the point. And I said, well, you're probably right. And I inclined, as one does, with as much gallantry as I could muster, to acknowledge it. Bow. Straightened up again. She said, bow lower. Bertie Wooster says at one point of someone that he writhed like an electric fan. And of another person that he withered like a salted snail. It's difficult to describe which of these would most best describe my reaction, but I found I had no will. Yeah. I bowed lower. And then I regained the vertical. And she said, no, much lower. So, as if I had been possessed, as if my corporeal form was occupied by an alien being, as if I lived only to obey. And by this time, people like Simon Hoggart and James Fenton were clustering around. What the fuck is this? I have witnesses, in other words. I sort of bent like this. And all the while, behind her back, she'd been rolling up the House of Lords order paper of the day into a little tube. And as I did, she stepped smartly behind me and gave me a terrific thwack on what I can only describe as my bottom. I straightened up with immense difficulty. and to see her turn away and over her shoulder say, "Naughty boy." Only preemption does that to me now. And I sometimes have to say it twice. The look she threw over her shoulder is with me still. And that was in 1978, ladies and gentlemen, brothers in Christ, comrades and friends. And nothing that she ever did after that, nor the people to whom she did it, ever surprised me. Nothing came as a surprise after that. So it pays to have sex with the leader of the opposition.
Hitchens, just another question to plumb your well of knowledge. There's a guy called Henny Youngman who I've always regarded as some sort of role model for you, in that he was British and he was a writer and he went over to the States and he liked drinking. And there's a line that he came up with which he said, "When I read about the evils of drinking, I gave up reading." And I wondered if you could tell me a little more about Henny Youngman and if he had any other great one-liners like that.
Was Henny Youngman British? I didn't know that. Amazing number of American comedians do turn out to be British in the first years, as it were. I will always promise an honest answer. If I don't know, I'll tell you. I didn't know that about Henny Youngman. I'm amazed as well. Bob Hope is a Brit. And I actually once saw him do a stand-up act introducing Prince Philip, which must have been, what a trudge that was, in Los Angeles at Merv Griffin's old hotel, where he said, "Not everyone knows this, but I'm actually English. I was born in Eltham, in Middlesex." He said, I didn't leave Eltham, Middlesex, till I was 5. And then he said, it was either that or marry the girl. I remember Dean Martin said that he was really sorry for people who didn't drink, because when they woke up in the morning, that was the best they were going to feel all day. So I can feel Youngman's pain, all right.
Is it on? Okay. You said you'd be honest, so tell me, what are you most frightened of?
Boredom. Boredom terrifies me. I feel it like a physical sensation, like a choking dream, like a smothering dream, as Wilfred Owen says in Dulce et Decorum Est, as if I go on talking to this person or being exposed to this set of circumstances for any longer, I really might die or go mad or bite someone. At any moment, it leads to a fugue state. So arranging not to be bored is a fantastically large part of my life. Fending off bores, finding out where they might be, where they might be coming, and you know it's not paranoia, because you know that there really are a lot of them around, and that they really do want to come and talk to you. And tedium is the enemy. Because you'll be dead a very long time, I'm sure of that. And I've seen some dress rehearsals for it take place, and as I say, it's a losing struggle. There isn't a minute to be spent being bored. Anything is better than boredom. No terror could be worse than boredom. Against the bores, always against the bores. No, I am. It's a physical fear as well as an emotional one. It's a dread. It's a nightmare. It's a poltergeist. It's a haunting. It never leaves me. I won't be bored. And then there are the ones who aren't just boring, but they're the cause of boredom in others. The people who spread tedium like a fog. It's full time. If that's all you did, you'd be busy all day. Mustn't be boring. Don't be boring. Don't put up with a minute of it. Say, some people think it's bad manners, it is bad manners if you've met someone at a party and been introduced. You take your chances, but you're not supposed to look over their shoulder to see if there's someone more interesting. And it's true, you shouldn't, that's rude. But you can say, I'm sorry, you're just fantastically boring. I don't have any time to give to this. Nothing you could say would ever interest me. Don't bore somebody else. I'm sorry, I just can't take it for another moment. I just can't take it. I won't take it. I don't have to take it. I'm going now.
I'd like your sort of unedited opinion of a certain Peter Hitchens and a Toby Young.
If all your young life, when you're, say, 2, you think you've got it all figured out. You think, I'm going to kill my father really quite soon, and then I'll have Mummy all to myself, and she'll do everything I say, not just the things she's already done, but some other things that I haven't asked her to do yet. If that's your plan, as it was mine, the last thing you want is a baby brother. So it doesn't particularly matter which brother it was. It could have been a different brother, a nicer brother, sweeter brother, more left-wing brother, more right. It couldn't have been a more right-wing brother. You just don't want it. My life was, I can't tell you how awful it was. I had all my ducks in a row. I had all my pieces on the board. I knew Mummy was mine. She had more or less told me so. Daddy was kind of, shy, one of those silent, not necessarily strong, but silent. It gashes me to this day. Don't really know Toby Young or feel about him that strongly. But he better not try and get between me and Mummy, is all I'm saying. If he knows what's good for him.
Princess, if you had to do one of these terrible TV reality programs and you had to invite 5 people to host the show with you or to have dinner with you, who would you invite and why would you invite them?
The ideal dinner party or companionship game, it's like the ideal trying to make up the perfect cricket team. Or something. In the end, it's going to be self-defeating because... But I can't dodge your question. I suppose I would want to have... It would be all guys, I'm awfully sorry to say. No. See, because in the long run, the guys don't let you down in quite that way. No, I saw it coming. I saw it coming like a bend in the road. I thought, I better confess it now rather than have it wrung out of me later. When I think about it, I think about chaps. If you asked me which women I would have on the same show, actually I wouldn't tell you, but I'd break my promise. But if it was men, you really want to know? Well, why would you expect it to be anyone you knew about? Am I going to just pick celebrities? Is that what you think of me? It has to be people you've heard of to please your thirst for reality TV. I repudiate this question. If it was girls, it would... No, never mind. No, I can't. But it couldn't never be the same. No, it couldn't be the same ones.
Good evening.
Good evening yourself.
Do you see yourself in Peter Fallow in Woolf's Bonfire of the Vanities?
No. Those who've read the Bonfire of the Vanities, who've read novels, will know that Peter Fallow is an abject drunk, a sponge, a social toady, a climber, an incompetent journalist who writes about the houses of rich people and the gossip of New York City. So I know it's not me. A lot of people thought that it might be me because he's in there for a reason. He's in there for a quarrel I had with Anthony Hayden Guest, which I could tell you all about if you liked. But, do you want to hear all about it? Okay. Anthony Hayden Guest is a brilliant writer in many ways, but he is a bit of a Brit, a bit of a piss artist, a bit of a New York socialite, and when I had to write an attacking profile of Tom Wolfe once, which I really wanted to do, I asked Anthony to arrange a meeting between us, and then I did to Tom Wolfe what he does to everyone else. I eavesdropped his conversation, ran to the men's room every now and then to write it down, and wrote a piece showing how shabby his table talk was, exactly what he'd done to Leonard Bernstein and the others. And he was unbelievably slow to see the joke. For such a white-coated, straw-hatted, Panama-boated wit, he was fucking slow. Very slow to see the joke. And I'm sad to say, very quick to take it out on poor Anthony, who I hadn't told Anthony that was my plan at all. Wolfe thought poor Anthony had set it up. So it was a bad business, and he quarreled with Anthony and cast him out of his circle, and then he put in the book a journalist, an English sponger, who's clearly, well, I'll just say, not me. This journalist also, no, this would be dirty. This would involve filth. You're going to demand filth? Barracking for filth. Okay. No one ever loses money betting on the lowest common denominator of his audience. Well, the story about Anthony Hayden Guest is always that he's cursed. Lots of men worry about this. It isn't always discussed in public. Not everyone comes clean about it. But a lot of men worry that their penises are too large. And that... It's an impressive cackle there. And where was that? Right under the lights I get this sort of eldritch mirth at the idea of a dick that's too big. Well, what they worry about is there won't be enough blood for both of them. Although there may be some urgent need for a transfusion. And the myth about Anthony was that this was true, and that's in the book too. A terrible, a really disgraceful, unsuitable for family consumption episode where the naughty girls at the office during the Christmas party peel back the horrible lid of the Xerox machine and take the helplessly drunk man and slap it on and Xerox them. How low can you go? Anyway, Anthony became very cross with me because he said he blamed me for the whole thing and the misrepresentation of him in the book, and he put his hands right around my neck like this on the steps of the New York Public Library after a Vogue dinner and said, "You've ruined my entire reputation in the town and you've held me up to mockery." And in Wolfe's book, and it was quite an impressive pressure. I had the time to say, "But Anthony, all I really said about you is you've got a gigantic cock." And his grip palpably relaxed around my throat while he thought about that. And I had time to break free. So it goes to show, if you know how to find somebody's G-spot, that's half the battle. I can't believe I told you any of that. But I promised you a truthful reply.
If you believe that men... Sorry.
Don't make any sudden moves.
If you believe that men don't let you down in the long run, what happened with Mummy?
Money? Can you take another run at saying that? I'm sorry.
Certainly. If you believe that men don't let you down in the long run, what happened with Mummy?
Mummy stuck by me to the end.
How is it then?
And what?
How is it then that you believe that only men won't let you down?
Who are you? Where are you? I know where you live already. I just don't know who you are.
I'm interested.
Yes. Mummy stuck by me to the end. You'll have to be content with that. And I to her.
What did you think of the reporter at the New York Times that made up the stories? And have you ever made anything up?
Of the recent scandal at the New York Times? The editor of the New York Times is a man called Howell Raines, who some of you may have heard of or even seen in action. And he's quite a nice guy, I think. And he's from Alabama originally. I believe he's from Birmingham, Alabama. That's how they pronounce Birmingham. Birmingham, Alabama. And about 5 or 6 years ago, he wrote a story about growing up, a story about himself. I mean, it was a biographical story, autobiographical story, about growing up in the South, in the deep South, in the 50s and 60s, and how bad he felt at being a white guy in Birmingham, Alabama, and how he learned everything he needed to know about segregation and racial discrimination, racism as a system, from a very nice black nanny that he happened to have. And in a way it was a very affecting story, and in another way I thought it was a very nauseating story, because I thought I'd read enough by then about white boys in the South who'd learned all about social reality from their cooks, their maidservants, their footmen, their serfs, and other black people who were in a position to give them full information about what was going on. And I actually couldn't believe that someone who was that senior at the New York Times would write such an embarrassing story about himself at that stage and get it published in the Sunday magazine of his own paper. But it came back to me recently because it's very obvious to me that a young jerk called Jason Blair, who's a fantasy merchant and a crackhead and a coke artist and a fall-about drunk and a plagiarist and a general Walter Mitty figure, had been allowed to roam free through the paper, making up anything he liked and getting it printed, and it was because Howell Raines thought that he was his nanny's son. The worst form of racism, I think, is condescension. No, let's not say the worst. The worst, we know what the worst is like. But a very bad form of it is condescension or patronizing. If you want to know how to piss off black people in America, it could come in handy one day. Want to know how to piss them off? There are two ways. One is to compare their civil rights struggle to the struggle of homosexuals for equal marriage rights. I don't know why that pisses them off, but it does. And the other is to say of any one of them how articulate he or she is. Don't be calling me articulate. You can see the objection right away. I hope. I very much hope you can, at any rate. I think Mr. Raines was too klutzy to see that distinction. So he's made his paper look a fool at himself. And so when people say, well, would it have happened if he had been white? The answer actually is no. That should be a final condemnation of a certain kind of condescension, I think. I have nothing to drink at the moment, Peter. Is there any remedy for this that you can devise? I mean, I haven't even got any water. The water behind you and the other stuff's on this way. Yeah, how could you tell? Was I running on empty? My view, my practice, my promise, comrades, is that I won't leave when anyone feels they have an unanswered question, but don't try me too high. What time is it, for one thing?
I've got two questions, if possible.
I'll be the judge if they're possible or not.
Okay. The first question is, why did you really leave the Nation? I'm not convinced by what you wrote in your last column in the Nation about the reasons.
Who is this
that you
person?
can tell us about it. The second question is about, can you tell us a bit more about Martin Amis? Are you still best friends? And in your heart of hearts, who do you think is a smarter one?
Just do the last 5 words again. No, the last 10.
Okay, the second question then. Can you tell us about you and Martin Amis?
Yes.
Are you still best friends? And in your heart of hearts, who do you think is the smarter one?
I left the Nation because, I don't know if you know the tone of voice I'm talking about, but someone who says, how can you tell? If you hear someone say, well, Saddam Hussein's a very bad guy, but there are lots of bad guys around the place. You know immediately this person probably doesn't care and certainly doesn't know anything about Iraq or Saddam Hussein, and that they're trying to change the subject. The same person is likely to go on to say, anyway, as between Bush's fundamentalism and bin Laden's, what's to choose? We need regime change in Washington. Some glib stupidity of this kind, some pitiful idiocy of this sort. Saddam Hussein called a cabinet meeting where he ordered one half of his cabinet to shoot the other half so that they could all be complicit. The survivors, those who hadn't been tortured to death or otherwise murdered, would be the murderers. It's a mafia system as well as a national socialist and fascistic one. Saddam Hussein has destroyed the lives and society and environment of three populations in his country, the Kurdish, the Shia and the Marsh Arabs. Saddam Hussein has tortured to death the brother of his own foreign minister and tortured his other brother not quite to death, and then sent Naji Sabri, who I used to know, out wearing a five-piece suit to do elegant diplomacy with Chirac. That was the guy you saw. That was Naji Hadithi. That's what Saddam had made him into a zombie by torturing and killing his brothers. Tariq Aziz, the other smoothie, had his son sentenced to 25 years in jail just before the last UN discussions began. This is evil, by the way. There isn't another word for it. President Bush didn't refer to an axis of sin. Don't get me wrong. If he wanted to win over some liberals, he would have done better to say axis of lesser evil. Then they'd have all run in behind him. Evil is a word not from religion. It's a word from modern political philosophy. It's from, in our usage, it's from Hannah Arendt. Radical evil and the banality of evil come from serious discussions about why it is that Europe became genocidal. People who titter at this, or the use of necessary words, are frivolous and flippant. I can't tell you how through I am with people who talk like that. I can't tell you how through I am with them, how little respect I have for them, how sick I am of their little jingles, their avoidances of reality and responsibility. So it wasn't enough just to piss on them with as much velocity or height as I could muster in print. I had to say, I'm not going to work for the magazine that provides these titters to unserious people anymore. From now on, they can titter on their own. They can titter without me. It's a kind of a money-mouth relationship, in other words, which everyone has to come to a certain point in their life. It was more than a political disagreement. Martin is able to quote not just poetry but prose. I can do a certain amount of poetry and sonnet sequence type, but Martin can quote paragraphs of prose from Dickens and Nabokov and show a real understanding of them. It's an achievement I've very, very, very rarely seen replicated. And in addition to that, he's the only blonde I've ever really, really loved.
Good evening.
Good evening yourself.
Can you tell us what you think the major reasons are for you not being a major politician or a major rock star?
Again, if I may do it in reverse order. Well, the rock star is obvious. I couldn't handle any more action than I'm getting as it is. It would be surplus to requirements. Okay? I just don't need the aggravation of being rock star. I used to want very much to represent a constituency in Parliament. I'd have at one point given anything to do it, but I was expelled from the Labour Party because of Vietnam, and I decided that I was prouder of that than of anything I could have done in the other direction. It's still, to me, a moment of pride that the Wilson Labour Party kicked out myself and the rest of the then student leadership of the Labour Party, and we considered that resignation or expulsion to be final. And still is, I think, the lowest point of the post-war Labour Party. Others might nominate other low points, but it won't go any lower than Harold Wilson licking Lyndon Johnson's bottom. It won't. So that's why I had to give up that. And then I found, well, I wasn't fit for any other work but journalism. And now you see the harvest, as Jeeves used to say. As Bertie used to say. Now view the harvest. My dear chap, thank you. I'm afraid of losing my voice, and I need this particular medicine. I'm beginning to rasp a bit. That was a very solemn question, by the way. You flirt with a solemn ending to the evening if you go on like this.
Mr. Hitchens, you know Larkin very well, and you know that Larkin in Dockery and Son said, life is first boredom, then fear. So can we have a real answer to the question? Because you're too old to be bored. So what do you really fear?
Larkin in that was, it seems to me, is echoing Kierkegaard, which says, life, the bloody thing about life is you have to live it forward and only be able to review it backwards. You can't find out what the mistake is till you've made it. There you are, you're stuck with that. Larkin helps you with stoicism, I think, in that reflection, and in many other ways too. And he has one actually fantastic poem. I can't do it all about tedium. It's about a party invitation that he gets and can't bear to open, or finally does. It says, Anis Mirabilis. No, it's not Anis Mirabilis. No. That's the Chatterley poem. Surely. That sexual intercourse began in 1963, which was rather late for me, between the end of the Chatterley band and the Beatles' first LP. That's Anis Mirabilis. The one about being bored senseless as soon as you open an envelope and discover an invitation from some bores begins, my wife and I have asked a crowd of craps to come and waste their time and ours. Perhaps you'd care to join us. In a pig's arse, friend, says Larkin. And the guy is called Warlock Williams. Warlock Williams, dear Warlock Williams, he says now. I could spend every evening, if I wanted, canted over to catch the drivel of some bitch who's only read Witch. You could tell how he really hated being bored, even for a second. I love him for that, and for his atheism, and for his making himself impossible for Thatcher to nominate as poet laureate once she found out about This Be the Verse.
But he said at the end of that poem, Warlock Williams, that in the end he could see reasons to spend time with bores because of what being alone did to the thoughts he had.
True. Well, he was afraid the bores would win in the end because it was a choice between them and solitude. The same way as he thinks about when in church going. He thinks, well, this is all nonsense, but as long as you don't believe a word of it, you can spend a tranquil moment in a church. But as the first line says, once I'm sure there's nothing going on. And everyone knows This Be the Verse, I presume. Well, that's why Thatcher wouldn't nominate him. So.
Good evening. I'd like to expand on your views on the royal family. Do you think the fact that we still live in a monarchy says something about the British public, or does it say something about the attributes of the royal family?
Thomas Paine, who was, I think, the greatest Englishman and the greatest American, and is the first man to use the expression the United States of America, I think, I'm pretty sure, and is the moral author of the Declaration of Independence, and the man who organized the ruin of the Hanoverian riffraff in North America, said, as well as having written The Age of Reason and the Rights of Man, and showing that you can't have one without the other, that the two concepts are the same. The Age of Reason, the Rights of Man. You invents human rights. I know where you live too. Don't do that. He said that a hereditary government is as good as a hereditary poet. or hereditary mathematician. Actually, it's not as good, because I think some mathematical talent can be inherited. I don't think much poetic talent can be. But it's as absurd as that. So people who want to be governed by it are servile. My quarrel with monarchism is obviously for its absurdity and stupidity, the idea that it's designed by the blood. Breeding a ruling family and selecting it is as nasty in its implication as breeding a master race. Eugenics won't do for politics. You can't do it. They say, well, of the wretched Spencer girl, they said, well, at least she had an heir and a spare before she was cut down. Well, how nasty is that? It's like reading about some ghastly animal experiment. No, people who want to be ruled in this way, the quarrel, therefore, is with monarchical opinion. These people are servile. They want to be impressed in this way. That's the kind of thing they like. The quarrel is with public opinion. What's more horrible, to see some mediocre imposter ride by in a golden coach, or to see people, flinging themselves onto the pavement to get a glimpse of it and tell all their children about it and say, you won't believe the excitement I had today. The human race is damned with people who are willing to worship. The willingness to worship is our problem. It's like North Korea. You get every chance to praise the leader all the time and thank him for your benizons and for being the fount of all good things. You're a serf if you think like that. So the real thing is to cure British people of servility. Otherwise you could take the monarchy away and they bring it back.
Christopher, two last questions.
My dear.
Thanks for a very entertaining talk, by the way.
You're welcome.
If the 2004 election came between Bush and John Kerry, who would you rather see win?
I would be for the re-election of the president at the moment. I don't like the look of Mr. Kerry. I'll give you one reason why. He's not a bad guy. By the way, I think it's very improbable the Democrats, having not carried one single southern state last time, are likely to elect another northeastern Massachusetts politician. I think they'd be very ill-advised to do so. But if they do, one reason will be that their man is a war hero. And I don't think there were any war heroes in the Vietnam War. And I don't admire people who went and volunteered for it, as John Kerry did, especially those who took a video camera along with them to record their exploits in the Mekong Delta for later political videos. I'm sorry, I don't think Vietnam should have been used in that way by ambitious young cadets. And I'm mentioning it because a lot of people falsely say that you're in a better position to advocate a policy of force, for example, in foreign policy, if you have yourself been a soldier or a combatant. The direct implication being you're in a weaker position if you have not. That people who haven't been in combat ought not to be pronouncing on war, where soldiers will be sent. This is an incredibly dangerous point of view. It would mean that Abraham Lincoln, who'd never been in the army, could not have fired General McClellan, who was a segregationist general who was holding up the action in the fight against the Confederacy. What right does Lincoln have to dismiss a brave soldier? What does he know about war? It would have meant Truman couldn't have dismissed the megalomaniac Douglas MacArthur as chairman of the Joint Chiefs because he wanted to run a private war in Korea and China. It's very essential to have civilian control. And if the Democrats nominate Kerry, I can tell you now what will happen. All the supposedly anti-war liberals will be saying it's better to have someone who was part of a criminal war in Vietnam than someone who dodged the draft. And that will be a test of how utterly insincere and shallow and vapid anti-war opinion is in the United States and elsewhere.
You've done a lot of work on gay rights, and a lot of your heroes are gay.
I have not.
You have.
What is this?
You've written about it, haven't you?
No, I wouldn't touch you with a barge pole.
You have. I was going to ask, have you ever slept with a man?
No, you have me confused with a whole other person.
No. I've read your stuff. You write.
Right.
A lot of your heroes.
Oh, all right. I've written about gay men.
a lot of your heroes.
He's a lumberjack and he's a gay.
Have you ever been tempted by homosexuality yourself?
Yeah, very much so. Well, I've been more than tempted.
Oh, you have to explain that.
Well, look, if you say you've only been tempted, it means you violate the rule of try at least everything once. Okay. To say you've only been tempted would be an empty statement. You have to have some follow through if you say you've been tempted. You have to say, okay, what, tempted enough to find out what it was like? Yeah, that tempted. Wait. You see, there's all the difference in the world. The girls offered to buy me one. And you wonder why I gave it up. I frankly wouldn't trust a chap who hadn't shopped on that side of the street. And it has to be avowed, it should be avowed, that homosexuality is a form of love as well as a form of sex, and deserves respect and, in my case, nostalgia for that reason. Why do you laugh at that? That's not supposed to be funny. That was supposed to be touching. It was touching. Cheap mirth, the vilest kind. No, you may not believe it now, but I mean, there was a time, I was rather more presentable, when, I had to fend them off. Some of them. Others, oh, never mind. Okay, how are we doing? That was a near one, I must say.
How you doing, man? Other than alcohol and tobacco, have you ever experimented with any other substances?
Try anything once, except incest and Scottish dancing. Would be roughly it. I did not ever have anything to do with the so-called mind-expanding lysergic acid preparations that were freely available when I was a teenager in the 60s. I thought anyone who messes with that is a fool, or is going to become one if they weren't one before, and I know some very damaged survivors of that to this day. I never went anywhere near that. So I can't really say being true to the rule, but yeah, you try me on anything else, I could give you a rough read on it. Most of them end up, well, of course, everything, as Martin says in Money, when he offers, John Self offers the other character at lunch, he offers him a sip of this poisonous, bubbling carafe of red wine. The guy says, no, I won't do it. If I drink, I feel like shit after lunchtime. I feel like shit in the afternoon. And Martin says, yeah, but if you don't have a drink, you'll feel like shit all lunchtime. Life's like that, he goes on to say. You want to feel good in the morning or good in the evening? You want to feel good when you're young or good when you're old? So it's all a trade-off. But with, for example, cocaine, it seems to me you have to choose between that and sex in the end. People can't, in the end, do both. That gives a lot of people pause. So be exorbitant but discriminating would be my line. And as ever, thanks for asking.
That sounded like the Citibank billboards.
That sounded like?
The Citibank billboards.
Still didn't get it.
The Citibank billboards in New York that tell you to live richly, but, be careful.
Live richly, die poorly. No, I don't get it.
Well, I have a quick question. Do you vote in the U.S.?
Nothing exceeds like excess. No, I don't. I have a platform. I have a way of imposing. I can say what I like. People have to put up with it. So it's much better than voting. They lowered the voting age to 18 when I was 19. So I still had to wait till I was 21 to vote. It was a cruel trick that was played on our generation, actually by Richard Nixon and others, and I don't think I've actually voted for anyone else since, but I've shouted the odds about it. Would you like a clean one or a filthy one? So you see, it's so easy. It's just easy. There was a young man from Devizes. I was just thinking locally. I'm acting globally, but I'm thinking locally. From Devizes, whose balls were of two different sizes. The left one was small, no good at all, but the right one was big, won prizes. No. Was a young lady of Exeter, so pretty the chaps craned their necks at her, and one was so brave as to take out and wave the distinguishing mark of his sex at her. Was a young fellow named Rex with exceeding small organs of sex, so when charged with exposure, he replied with composure, de minimis non curat lex. Are you challenging me? Well, Penzance? No, come on. Nantucket. Anthony Powell succeeds in making a lot of very improbable names seem plausible for his characters in A Dance to the Music of Time, which I hope you've all read all 12 volumes of. Because if you give someone a place name as a name, however ludicrous it appears, it's somehow convincing, as with, say, Widmerpool, which is in, I believe, Leicestershire. And place names are very important for limericks, and that's why it's a great English form, because there's so many wonderful place names to pick. But there's some quite good ones in New England, too, as with the young man from Nantucket, whose thing was so long he could suck it. Who remarked with a grin as he wiped off his chin, "If my ear was a pussy, I'd fuck it." Par exemple, I mean, the young girl from Penzance, the poor girl from Penzance, actually, who boarded a bus in a trance, so the passengers fucked her. Likewise, the conductor. Poor driver shot off in his pants. Isn't it amazing how they always go for the smart, the filth? You never lose money by underestimating them.